can, so just, yes, that's why Remy said just shout them out.
Understanding.
Understanding in what way?
Of other people's cultures and their backgrounds that you may not be aware of.
I think there's kind of a lot of, I don't know, like subliminal messaging in a way kind of going on every day, and you kind of notice that with how you associate some words with others, even if you don't always like believe that. So maybe just kind of being aware of sort of the stuff that we're getting, even though it's contrary to sort of how we want to go forward or how we want to associate things. I don't know what like that would be.
So like recognizing your bias.
Yeah.
Maybe gaining new perspective.
This might be a little different, but like just having everyone participate within the room.
Yeah. Having other participate in the room.
I think a big thing is having fun. Because you figure it's a weekend. A lot of these kids don't want to probably be there. If you have it in fun, engaging, otherwise they're not going to take anything from it. So you have to get to that threshold before you really get any sort of good conversation or anything.
Yeah, I would say sometimes these discussions on like race and class and gender and sexuality, they can get pretty intense, and so sometimes it is hard for that to be fun, but I definitely agree, like engaging, making sure that people aren't like zoning out, that people are actively listening.
I think recognizing how your team maybe perpetuates some of these prejudices.
Any others?
I also think like listening, so that like we make sure it's clear that everyone's listening to each other's like opinions and not cutting people off if they like disagree.
All right, so this is what we start off our every single facilitation that we do with, and that's because setting goals gives a clear understanding for everyone kind of why they're there and prevents them from like getting bored. So when you guys step into your rooms with your small groups, remember that after you introduce yourself to set up a goal for the whole group, or even have what we did with you guys as shared goals, so that engages other people, helps to set the tone for you.
And then our next step after that is to set conditions for success, and we also like to write these up so people can refer back to them throughout the course of the discussion. So conditions for success are a set of guidelines that the group creates together that fosters the most productive discussion possible. So we can set some conditions for this training right now, and some conditions for success that you guys think would be important during your own facilitations on Sunday.
So we can start one off. Like an example that we use is using I statements, and so what that means is speaking from your own experience and not using generalizations. All right, so we'll throw it to you guys. Feel free to shout them out.
Being respectful of others' opinions and almost not taking it personally, but recognizing it's okay to be different in a productive way.
Good, and that gets to, so like, everyone's experience is valid. Yeah.
Agreeing to some kind of privacy so people can say what they want to say and they don't think people will gossip about it.
Definitely. What happens in the room stays in the room.
Just coming in with an open mind, so you know, maybe getting some new perspective that you didn't have before.
You got to risk it for the biscuit and go out of your comfort zone.
Step out of your comfort zone. Yes, that's a big thing. A lot of times I know we hear in class like, oh, this class is a safe space. Whenever we're having these discussions, we like to say that it's a brave space. And the reason we use that term is that learning comes from discomfort. And so when people are uncomfortable and they're recognizing like that race matters or that gender matters, that discomfort is where learning can happen.
Risk it for the biscuit. I like that.
Another one that we like to include is that silence is okay. A lot of times in discussion, when you ask a question, some people, especially introverts, like need time to think, and throwing up on the conditions for success that silence is okay allows these individuals time to gather like their thoughts and actually share it within the group. So that's one that's really important.
I would say too, like, know how much space you're taking up, so you don't want to dominate the conversation. Leave other people out.
All right, these look good. Are there any final suggestions? All right, so setting your goals, setting your conditions for success. So now what we're going to go into is an activity we call the identity wheel. So I'll just split them in half and just pass them around. If you have a pencil, that would be awesome. If you don't, maybe ask people for pencils or pens.
Larry.
It's okay if I flip the story. I know
Yeah, go ahead.
Larry, how are you?
Oh, see, I think that works. There. Got one more. Might be short.
I don't know. I just grabbed a bunch.
Are there extras?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I just said that you guys won't be doing this in your facilitation, but we decided to throw this out to you guys. This is a activity we do a lot with various organizations on campus. And the reason we do this is because a lot of people don't realize how many like different facets of your identity there are. If you look on the left side of the paper, we have like 8 outlined identities and an other section. So what we like to do for you all to kind of test you guys is, for once in your life, not fill in check boxes, but just identify yourself the way you choose. And so the way we recommend that you go about this activity is to, next to each like label, write down how you identify, and then you see that pie chart, fill out the pie chart based on how you think it represents yourself. So what that means is whether that's, you put a big slice for how much you think about something, or whether you put a big slice for how much you think other people think about you, that's up to you. Ignore the instructions, ignore advantage, targeted. You don't need to worry about that. Just write it out and label yourself the way you would. So we'll give you a couple minutes.
Do we label it based on these?
Yeah. So first, I would fill out like each label, like how you identify
Took me
your
out for a
race,
second.
identify your gender.
Yes.
Also, we want to. Oh yeah, you may have questions about the identities. Answer it the way you would. This is going to be a silent activity, so just think within yourself, and then we can talk about what all those labels mean.
Especially a school like Georgetown kind of told me that, it's what you can do. Like, that's really what people count on at the end of the day, what you can give to them at the end of the day.
Religion, like
I had age as a smaller one. I kind of thought of it differently though. I was kind of thinking like within college, in terms of like senior, freshman, junior, like it matters in some places, but like classes and on like in sports, it kind of isn't as relevant. Yeah.
I put sexual orientation because as a straight person, it's mostly accepted in society.
I also had sexual orientation, which is pretty small, and also class, just being like middle class, like kind of like this average. I did something that doesn't really define my life in a negative or positive way, I think.
Okay, now I want you guys to answer which of these identities that you listed and put on your pie charts gives you the most privilege. So think about privilege in personal, interpersonal, cultural, and institutional level. It gives advantages, favors, and benefits to members of like the dominant privileged group. So which identities that you have give you the most privilege?
Is everybody familiar with that term from a sociological perspective? The difference between privilege and a privilege? It's shocking when I give this lecture to freshmen every year how many of them don't understand what privilege is, and so I don't want to take that for granted, but everybody gets the concept of white privilege is the one that's probably thrown up the most. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say white, and there's privileges that come along with that, and I think it's also interesting that that was kind of one of the smaller sections on my slides, just because probably my experience versus, you put race as one of your bigger ones. It's probably very different the way people maybe look at us from the beginning. So I thought that was kind of interesting because that probably does give me a lot of privilege. But yeah.
There's a male privilege that I think I have sometimes as a woman because like there's a social gap that men sometimes get paid more than women, or men sometimes get more jobs or get more opportunities for jobs. I have a sister, I have two sisters actually, so I always think about their opportunities and whatever they're going through.
I'd probably say ability, just because being a student athlete at a prestigious place like Georgetown just opens the doors for a lot more opportunities, at least I believe, in the future than some of our regular peers, I guess.
I would say being Christian also has a privilege, especially in the United States, because there's a general consensus that Christians are good people, and people are more suspicious of other religions that they don't know about. So I would say that gives some form of
All right, that sounds good. And so we hope that you take kind of the recognizing how many different identities and all the different voices and experiences that were shared right now to consideration when you go into these rooms, because just like the assistant director said, it's going to be a lot of mixed groups of people from different identities, and so recognizing that when you step into this room, people are going to have different experiences and be coming from very different places. So the final skill that we're going to teach you guys today is what we call naming dynamics. And so the reason we chose this skill for you guys when you guys come in to teach you guys as facilitators is that when you're facilitating, a lot of people think it's just about asking questions, but you are trying to create the best kind of dialogue you can. And so we're going to put it on to you guys, just looking at this room, how we're sitting, how the conversation's gone so far. Are there any dynamics that you guys already see taking place? I see someone, yeah, wow.
Like those two are sitting together, they came in together, like you sit.
What do you mean? So what is the significance of this group and this group?
Like, I like, obviously, it's obvious, but like, I just kind of, it's funny to me because like in high school, like one of my teachers was like, next time you go to the lunchroom, just see how people sit. And even though like you think like you're not racist at all, but we're not, but we automatically like segregate ourselves, which is crazy.
Yeah, what's the dynamics of race in this room right now?
A bunch of white guys sitting together and 3 girls sitting next to each other. And then, and then
It's also by sport.
That's
In our
also true,
department,
too.
that's probably how the clustering is even more. Wouldn't you?
yeah.
I don't know.
no, we stick together.
Like,
We're scared.
kids in our team like take classes together, eat together, walk around together. It's good and it's bad. It's good for team building, but at the same time, to others who just look at us like, oh, that's one big group, and so our group thing can be kind of intimidating.
I think that'll 100% happen at the rooms we sit in too.
Oh, yeah.
Kids will sit with their teams.
Yeah.
So that's something to notice when you guys are facilitating at this event, like seeing how people just sit. That's like the first step in really understanding what type of group you're dealing with. So for our activity though, we're gonna go even further. We're not just gonna talk about how we're sitting, but we're gonna talk about how we're talking. Because this is a conversation, this is a dialogue. Who takes up space, who interrupts each other, that has a big play in facilitating a great dialogue. So we are going to do an activity with scenarios, and we're just going to have you guys pretend to facilitate a conversation. So to give some context, whenever we're dealing with naming dynamics, phrases that we like to use to basically call out the dynamics that's happening and encourage other people to speak is, for example, if I'm in a conversation, I'm facilitating a dialogue, and I hear a lot of guys talking and they're taking up a lot of space, I'll say, you know, I've heard a lot of male voices, I'd like to invite female voices into the space.
Or vice versa, not vice versa, but like if you're facilitating a dialogue on race and a lot of white people are dominating the conversation, as a facilitator, it's your role to say, thank you for sharing, but I'd like to invite people of color to offer their opinions.
And sometimes, yeah.
How do you balance that without putting people on the spot? Because it's very likely that you're in a room with majority white or not diverse, and then so if there's 2 or 3 black people in the room, and you're saying I'd like to hear more diversity, what if they don't want to talk about it? How do you balance that?
That's a good question. Okay, so I would say that if minority voices are not talking at all, and you're a good 10 minutes into a conversation, that's when it's like you need to call it out. Like just be like, you know, we're having a talk on race and only white people are talking.
And like we said before, like it is going to be uncomfortable when you call that out, especially if there is like you feel like you're targeting 3 people in a room full of like white people or a room full of men. But that's where the growth and discussion stems from, so it's necessary.
And on the flip side of that, you might be having talk on race and people of color are dominating the conversation and you're missing out on the white voice in the conversation. And so it's important to say, you know, I've heard a lot of people of color talking. I'd like to hear white voices talk about their opinions or how they're feeling about this conversation right now.
I was just wondering, are we getting kind of prompts to start this, or will it just kind of, oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll have.
Yeah, so for this scenario, we'll like have volunteers go out and then we'll like give you guys prompts and parts. So yeah, so obviously like these discussions can get tough, and our scenarios, they might seem crazy, they might seem realistic, like they are based off real situations. And so that's why it's so important that you guys do start off with this. Because if things get out of hand, if people are interrupting each other, there's an argument, and it goes from a conversation to an argument between 2 people, you need to interrupt them and be like, all right, I want everyone to refer back to our conditions for success. Like, as a group, how do we think we're doing about that? And then, I was gonna say, and then it forces the group to like reassess themselves.
Or if like someone offers an opinion, but it's not from their own perspective, they're talking about something else, or they're talking about somebody else's experience. It's important to remind them to talk from only the I perspective. We find that's the most conducive form for discussion. And a lot of times in discussions, when you're offering your opinions, there will be like disagreements and difference of opinions, and people will say, yeah, but, and that's kind of our second condition for success.
Yeah, every experience is valid.
Yeah, so when someone says, yeah, but, it's kind of devalidating or invalidating that person's experience. So it's important as a facilitator to really recognize when that's said. Like sometimes it's said really fast, so like you don't catch it, but it's really important to call it out.
When you say call it out, like, can you give an example?
So that's what I, like when I just said, like, you know, I've heard a lot of blank voices. Or I've just heard, like, even if it's the same people, maybe they are from different identity groups, but they're dominating the conversation, say, like, thank you for sharing. I'd like to invite people who haven't spoken yet to speak.
Or like if someone does like invalidate someone else's experience, like you don't have to say you did it, but like you can say remember, or let's refer back to our conditions for success. Let's remember that every experience is valid. So you don't have to like call a person out directly because like we understand that makes someone.
So set the conditions for success at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like we did today.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? These are good questions. All right, we're going to go into the scenarios, and there will be like debrief after each time. So, should we have maybe like 2 people? Oh, okay, so 2 brave volunteers to try and tackle the first facilitation. All right, Matt. 1 more.
I'll do it.
All right, so you guys are going to come out here with me. Ruby, you want to knock on the door when you're ready?
Yeah. Okay, so this is really going to be a test for the facilitators. So in this room, I'm going to need some people to take on some different roles. So this scenario is going to be about race, and the facilitators are going to come in and ask you guys a question about racial profiling. And in this scenario, we want a person of color to share an experience about racial profiling, and then we want a white person to interrupt them and so like this is a real scenario that we have dealt with before in a facilitation. So we were talking about racial profiling in a club, and a person of color shared their experience, and then a white person said, well, you know, also when I wear a hoodie, I also feel like I might be a target, or I might be susceptible to danger and stuff. And he kind of just didn't think about the race factor that was involved. So someone volunteered to say something along those lines, and then so basically how it's gonna go is they're gonna come in here and they're gonna start a conversation about racial profiling, and then I want one volunteer who's a person of color to share an experience. Okay. And then next I want a white person to kind of invalidate their experience, or like say an experience like I just said about the hoodie. You can use that if you want, if you can't think of something else. Okay. And then to create a kind of conflict for them to solve, I want another person of color that's not you to disagree with him.
So we like acting all this out.
Because this will happen when you guys are facilitating, and it's important for them to kind of realize how to, or kind of practice how to call it out. And it's easier because you guys all kind of know each other, so.
There's a big name.
Oh, are you still wanting someone to do that?
Yeah. Oh, you just have to do it. You can just be like, well, I don't think that. Okay, so when she starts talking, I want another white person to interrupt her.
This is a lot. I'll go for it.
Try to wing it.
Yeah.
She interrupts him?
No, she doesn't interrupt. She disagrees with him. And then he interrupts her.
you. Okay.
Okay. And then their job is going to be to call out all those dynamics.
This is a movie.
They have to get. Okay, so are you guys good?
So, get your mindset. The actor studio, here we go.
So you guys can return to your seats. I will take a seat. Yeah, just sit. You can sit where you are.
Hey everyone, hope you guys are having a great day so far. The first topic that we want to talk about and just ask you guys is, what do you guys think about racial profiling?
So I gotta tell you about this one experience I had that was really bad with racial profiling. So New Year's probably like 5 years ago. Oh no, I was in college like 3 years ago. Like I decided to go to this rave in Atlantic City. Like I thought it was gonna be the greatest thing ever. So me and my boys, it's a group of us, it was like 4 black guys. Why did we decide to go to a rave on New Year's? I don't know. So we're walking up to the door. We're feeling ourselves. We were drinking in the parking lot, so we're blasted at this point. And we get right to the door, and all of a sudden, like we see this cop walking in front of us. It's kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird. And there's 2 more on the side of us. We're like, damn, we getting a police escort in this. So then all of a sudden, the one in front of us draws his gun and puts it at us. Like, everybody put your hands up. We're like, oh, shit. And we're thinking like, damn, we just got caught drinking in the parking lot. We're going to jail. And they ask us like, where's the gun? Where's the gun? Like, and then all of a sudden, all of us have a police on us. Like, our hands are up out, our record patting us down.
Well, it's probably just because you were drunk.
Man, nah, it wasn't because I was drunk. It was because they thought, said.
It's a group of people drunk.
No, they said they were looking for a black guy in a white t-shirt. And we're at a paint party
I
where
disagree with you. I definitely think it's because you're of color. Like, clearly that
Of
happened.
course it's because I was of color.
I mean, if you're in a crowded place, though, like, they're probably just trying to, like, they hate anything bad from happening. Like, it could have been.
Of course, it's easy to think like that, like if it's never happened to you, but if it's happened to you, you know that it's clearly because they literally said they were looking for a black guy in a white t-shirt.
So let's remember, conditions for success. Corey, you want to read the conditions for success again, just so we're all familiar with them and make sure we're respecting each other in the dialogue?
I perspective. I guess I wasn't really talking from an I perspective there.
Okay, good job on the actors.
Yeah, that was awesome.
True story.
So obviously you won't always be this like lighthearted.
I just wanted to rate.
I respect that.
But yeah, great. So what Matt did there is he brought it back to the I perspective, and he had one of the, what would you call it, like people who did the infraction read the statement. So
The face
Yeah.
when you said that was
Do you
so
recommend
classic.
kind of calling them out specifically like that, or just doing a broad, hey guys, remember,
Yeah.
I perspective?
well, it seems that you two are probably a little more familiar with each other. So if you go with someone that you're not familiar with, say it's someone from a different team, I would just say like, all right, like thank you guys for the great line to always say is like thank you for sharing your like opinions and experiences. Now I want to open a question to the group, like can someone volunteer to read? So that way you don't have to call out if that would make you uncomfortable.
Does that ever happen though, where like someone's reading and then like staring at the person in there? Because I feel like this could get really uncomfortable with the fact that like, I don't know, but I feel like
Well,
it's gonna get, not people's feelings getting
yeah.
hurt, but it's just, it is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is uncomfortable, and so that's kind of the idea of like, it's very much a group keeping each other accountable. Kind of like, yeah, it doesn't like a team keep each other accountable. Yeah.
And a lot of the times, I can't remember a time where we had like the actual participants like read off the statements, but I guess because you guys were familiar, so it's like easier to be like, hey, can you read it? But a lot of the times, like us as facilitators to say, let's remember this, or let's refer back to this. Collectively.
I was thinking of like a name, but I don't know. I don't know everyone in the room. So.
And did you guys want us to interrupt them, or like that? You guys they kind of let that play out. I don't know if that's for the experiment or not, but like I think they like right when I said something, they probably could have said,
Yeah.
that's out of line." Type. Which would you?
Yeah, so normally like we would have kind of try to de-escalate that quicker, so it didn't turn into more of a back and forth between like 4 people in the group. But like obviously it was like our first time facilitating, so. But yeah, I would definitely like right when you said that to him, I would as a facilitator call that out right away, or kind of bring the group back and remind them. Like sometimes it's easy to remind, or sometimes like when that happens, One thing that we like to do is go back to the initial question that was at hand, because sometimes like we get caught up in like your particular experience and not just like the general like racial profile. Any other constructive criticism for your facilitators?
Okay, so we're gonna go through our second, and this will be our last scenario. So if I can take two other facilitators who are willing.
Did you want to say?
Oh, I can do it, yeah. You want to take that? Okay.
Okay, so two other people to facilitate.
Okay.
Come on, Larry.
All right, we have one, another volunteer. Okay, awesome.
Yes, sir.
All right, so this discussion is going to be on gender, and it's going to be how the question's going to be that you guys are going to be asked is how have you been treated differently based on your sex? So the reason we decided, so it's actually going to be in sex. The reason we decided to do that is because with you guys as athletes, I think it tends to be divided more like clearly by sex rather than gender. And so the dynamic that we want is we are going to have a male speaker who speaks first. So can I have a volunteer? All right, so you're just going to be talking about maybe an example of personal experience of how you were treated differently on maybe the sports realm or just in life because you were a guy. So any example you can think of that. And then I need a female to speak. All right, so then talk about experience maybe on the field because that's what you guys will be dealing with and your teammates of when you were treated differently as a female. And now I need another guy. All right, so then talk about something along the lines of how you were treated differently as a guy. Maybe we want to get at like masculinity, so like how being a guy has to make, like if there's something about having to be more aggressive. And then I need another guy. All right, and so speak on behalf of someone you know that's a woman and like her experience. And now I need another guy. All right, so then you speak after that.
On a woman's
No, on your own issue of being a guy.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Do you want to run through that one more time?
Yeah, okay, so basically, who's the first guy who speaks? Nice. Who is the next girl? Nice. Next guy? Nice. Next guy? Nice. Next guy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
When we're speaking, are we supposed to be like portraying our story in a way that it's like more, it's like worse than the person who spoke before us?
No, it doesn't have to be worse. It's just your own. So
Okay.
it doesn't, this one, besides the person of the example of the guy speaking on behalf of his female friend, it doesn't really matter what you're saying. Hopefully they can't hear, but what we want them to get at is that in a discussion on sex, we have 5 guys speaking and 1 girl. Does that make sense? All right, so I'll look at it.
Okay. How has anyone been treated differently based on your sex?
I think if you look at like men's and women's lacrosse, there's different values for the 2 different sports in terms of like how like each act on the field. In men's lacrosse, you're like really encouraged to be, you know, as physical and masculine and like aggressive as possible, and you know, not hurt another player, but like, you know, hit them as hard as you can and like kind of have that mentality. And I kind of feel like that's stressed more on the men's aspect of the sport and not so much on the women's, which is more of like your finesse and athleticism is more, you know, encouraged, and that's kind of a difference that I've felt.
Personal experience of mine, I would say, as a runner, there's this saying, you know, you run like a girl, which I think definitely was something that I had to deal with throughout high school, just, you know, not being as accepted by maybe the men's team if I wanted to run with them or participate with them. And I think it was hard, you know, to maybe break that barrier and get them to see me more as just a fellow runner as opposed to a girl runner.
With swimming, it's kind of similar where we're combined, where men and women are training together in the same lane. And if you let a girl pass you or anything like that, it's a big, like, people are like, what's wrong with you today? You sick or something? Like, even though a girl could just be having a good day or just be on top of it.
In high school, I had a volleyball friend a girl volleyball friend who would play at the same time as our football games, and whenever she would play, they'd be winning lots of games and going to playoffs and winning state, and people still wouldn't attend their games, and she would complain about that because she said that people aren't as interested in girls' games versus football games that they would come to.
There's a little difference here, but I know when I was trying to get my driver's license, it like took me a bunch of tries, and I similar to like you saying people you run like a girl. I would get kind of made fun of mainly by males saying like, oh, maybe you drive like a girl or something like that.
Well, thank you guys all for sharing. I know they're personal stories. You guys definitely stepped out of your comfort zone.
All right, so facilitators, did you notice any dynamic happening in the discussion?
I was a little like not as what's the word? Apparent, yeah, obvious as the first example, but David spoke about his friend who was a girl, so he wasn't thinking from the I perspective, and then
There was a lot of guys talking.
yeah, there's a lot of guys talking.
So I'll throw it to the facilitators. If you have a lot of guys talking, what's a way you can phrase a statement to get other voices?
Can we hear from some of the ladies?
Yeah, nice. All right. So that's just another example. Yeah, our time is coming to a close. So if you guys want to just go around, we always like to end our conversations on our events on a one-word reaction. It kind of just brings the whole group together and like allows everyone to reflect on how they felt about the event. So based on this training that you have with us, if you guys want to go through a one-word reaction, it can be in orders, it can be just like popcorn. So whoever wants to start.